Welcome back. You're watching Metropole Television. My name is Elijah Charles Kiage. And if you're just joining us, this is your official sector trends. It's a Monday, so let's get those conversations going on. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations October 2020 Global Report on Food Crisis, 135 million people in 55 countries and territories are facing acute food insecurity at a crisis level or higher, a situation that clearly requires urgent action. And the report further concluded that over 183 million people were experiencing a stressed level of acute food insecurity and have a high risk of sliding into a crisis level if confronted by additional shocks. Now, the situation is particularly worrisome in light of the evolving nature of the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, we look into financing agribusiness as a means of curbing food insecurity in the country amidst the pandemic. Joining us this morning, Justice Njeru, Senior Manager, Private Sector Development at Microsoft Consulting. Justice, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Elijah. Nice to have you.
Fantastic. We are also joined by Eric Kingori, Independent Consultant on Finance and Investments. Mr. Kingori, good morning.
Good morning. Morning, Elijah. Great to be here.
Happy to have you around as well. Now, let me start with you, Justice. Now, many of the problems faced by the African agriculture date way back before COVID-19. How can we assess where we are in terms of food security in the country?
Thanks, Elijah. Let me step one step back before we can even assess the situation of food security. And you remember, I think last year we had this conversation where we were talking about the challenges that we were facing at that point. We are talking about the armyworms, and then there came the drought, and then there came heavy rains, and then here we are. We're talking about COVID situation that hit us. So it has been a spiral, getting back on foot. And most importantly, what we are seeing, the issue in the last 1 year has been an investment into the sector. That is what has impacted really the situation that we are currently facing, where you've seen the government even announcing drought situation in the northern region of this country. And it's not only actually in Kenya, it's the entire Horn of Africa who is experiencing the same issue. So I look at it as investment being one of the critical issues. And according to the recent central bank report, we've seen that at least banks turned away 28% of SMEs that who applied for the loans, whereas from the microfinance, we saw 96% of the loan applied for were turned away. So that has a spiral impact, especially when we talk about microfinance sector, where 96% of the loans were turned away, applications were turned away, because most of our rural farmers, most of the agricultural dealers, this is where they get their resources for financing their operations.
Yes.
So there has been a lot of pressure in terms of the production and really looking at the entire value chain, all the way from production all the way to the markets. Lack of investment or strained investment in the sector has led to low productivity, low production at production level. Then again, the market issues that were there, the prolonged issue with the closure of the markets, then opening up, the curfew hours operations, all those issues also interfered in a way how we move the produce from the farm to the market.
Yes.
That taken holistically is what we are seeing now, aggregated together is what we are seeing as an impact of some areas facing acute shortage of food, or whereas we've seen some situation where in some area where plenty has been produced, but it does not reach to the market. A good example is what the photos were circulating recently in the media of someone who had produced about 600 bags of potatoes in Molo, but the market, they couldn't reach the market. They were being told to sell each bag at around 300 shillings, which was being described as an equivalent of 3 plates of chips or French fries. So there are all these dynamics that are in play. Some are inherent. I mean, we've had them, but we've not been able to sort them out.
Yes.
But COVID situation now presented another dilemma to the entire mix. And this is what we are seeing right now. I know the government is doing as much in the country, trying to rejuvenate the strategic grain reserves through the current the commission that was commissioned on the warehouse, trying to bring the strategies, marking them across the country so that in the next harvest that we have, then we have at least a good flow of food that can be stored for future use so that we don't get ourselves in the situation that we are currently at.
Yes. Let me bring in Mr. Kingori to the conversation as well. Mr. Kingori, when you look at where we are, and especially in the light of the COVID-19 pandemic, how attractive is the agriculture sector to investments now? Is that a place that we're saying, yes, you can hold out a little longer?
Thank you. So in my view, in terms of agriculture, or what we call agriculture, is that let's look at the statistics first of all. Let's start with the fact that agriculture is responsible for 30% of GDP. Let's also go to the fact that agriculture employs about 60 to 70% of Kenyan population.
Yes.
Just those two statistics tell you that it's actually a good area to invest in Kenya right now.
Yes.
Secondly, if you look at the population growth, and you are well aware what numbers we are talking about in the 44 million range, all these people need to be fed. So it makes it an extremely attractive area of investing.
Yes.
What we need to do is that we need to structure that area pretty well. We need to create markets for it, and we need to also talk to financial institutions and the people who want to invest to show them how they can actually invest in this sector. Yeah.
Pretty much. So let's talk about the effect of the COVID-19, therefore, Eric, on the investments in agriculture. How has the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted the flow of finance and investment within the agricultural market systems in Kenya?
Thank you, Elijah, again. So COVID disrupted practically everything. And you had just us talking about the gentleman in Molo who had potatoes and we couldn't get them to the market.
Yes.
So that was one of the biggest disruptions. So the supply chains as we know them, and supply chain in this case means how a product moves from where it is coming from to how it gets to the market, were all disrupted. So transport was a big issue. Also the fact that we, the consumers, could not go to our usual places to buy the foods that we wanted. So that affected the demand of food. Restaurants were closed, hotels were closed. So people who had cows, pigs, chicken, eggs, all these outlets where foods were being sold and are being routed through were all disrupted. Therefore, we ended up with a situation where farmers were left with produce at the farm, and really, they didn't have the demand for it. They had nowhere to take it for it to be consumed. And that affected the finance element of it. And it affected it greatly because quite a number of businesses could not service their dues and their obligations with the banks as they fell due. And therefore, if a bank or a financial institution has lent you money to come up with, to grow potatoes, and their aim is that when you sell, you pay back. If you are unable to sell and the potatoes get spoiled, then you get into problems.
Yes.
And obviously, the first thing that a financial institution will do is to say, okay, let's put a hold to that. We can't continue lending to a sector that is having problems like we are seeing. And how can we then pivot and adapt to this new environment and the new ways of doing the production and the new supply chains that then came up? So you'd find that a lot of other people, most people then started selling online. So I'm sure you have somebody who was telling you, I can get you a full chicken.
Yes.
You can get you a kilo of pork. I can get you all these sorts of things. These were channels and systems that were not there before COVID. So it's what we call pivoting and adapting. So you now find different ways of getting your product to to the end consumer. And these are the changes that then came about. And then now financial institutions and lenders have to adapt to the new value chains and the new supply chains that they were not used to. So there are huge elements of learning. There are huge elements of sanitizing these supply chains
Yes.
and the new processes that have come up.
Yes.
And also for people to understand how they work and evolve with them. Yeah. Thank you.
Pretty much. All right. Just as the adaptations and coping mechanisms, I mean, it's something that we're talking about right now, and innovations and technologies that have helped actors now in this particular sector to cope up during this period. Do you see that we have had to come up with these tools because to some sense then the focus that needs to be put on this particular sector, just as especially from the government, has not really worked out?
Sure. Thanks, Elijah, for that. And as Eric has mentioned, let me pick it up from there, because let me begin from the supply side.
Yes.
And the issues that these are the people, the suppliers of funds they faced, especially the microfinance and banks. We have had conversation with like now the microfinance, who typically do you understand they use the group methodology.
Yes.
And due to the containment measures, this was stopped at this point, so you could not meet physically. And this is one of the issues that I think Eric has alluded to, because while we were used to people meeting in group, discuss about the loans and approve the loans for the farmers, now their containment measures came and people would never meet. So the financial institutions had to adapt. So how else do we still get into meetings and ensure that we understand our customer and they can approve their loan? So this is where digitization came into play. So a lot of investment has to be done in the finance sector, where we are seeing microfinance circles and deposit-taking institutions and banks also had to invest heavily in customer engagement, first of all, customer engagement, and also the processes as well, ensuring that then the farmer could access either using USSD or app, then they could call guarantee, still the same approach when they are not physically meeting,
yes,
but they can call guarantee each other. That was one adoption that was done on the supply side.
Yes.
On the demand side, we have seen also the actors adapting as well, where the current engagement with the sources of, let's say, someone who's doing the off-taking or doing the processing, then for them to still get in touch with the producers, they had to adopt to digital channels as well, either through mobile or app or any other channel, to ensure that they are still in touch with what the producers are doing, the quality being produced. They are in touch with the market to ensure the flow of the entire chain is flowing very well. By the government as well, with what we saw, and this is what is happening currently, as I mentioned, in the country. We've seen the warehouse receipt system really, why it's being accelerated. As I said in our last discussion,
yes,
we were lagging behind if we compare ourselves with the rest of the East Africa countries, where our legislation now is in place. But the idea to have this the warehouse receipt operations localized in the various areas is to ensure that in future, in case of certain occurrences that we've had, then we are ready, and at least we have a stock that we can feed our population moving forward. There's a lot of push towards digitization, and as we talked and about agriculture sector development strategy, ASDG, the 2019-2029 talks more of and emphasizes on the digitization aspect, where we encourage the entire sector to adopt into digitization, to ensure that the technology leads the way, and that is going to help the government both the way to be able to have data to make decisions, because the issue has been lack of data. It's essential to have data when either we are doing input distribution or when we are making decisions towards food balance sheets that we have in the country. How much food of which nutrients do we have? Is it either maize or it could be vegetable or whatever.
Yes.
For us to have that, we need to have a central repository. And I think there are steps that are being done currently, and the agriculture, what was initially the Agricultural Marketing Board, now I think it's AFA. They are working to Agriculture Food as Authority, which is working strongly now to ensure that the food balances is kept in check every time. And we have data coming all the way from the regions for the government finally to make a decision on how much we need to import, how much is required at in which region, and what balances do we have, so that then the entire system, including the ministry and the other players, can chip in and see how we can put the balance into check.
Interesting facts you're mentioning there, Justice. So, Eric, also coming to the conversation then, I mean, we're talking about systems or a sector that is really shifting and readjusting now, really fighting a lot of other areas as well in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. So what is the outlook now? We're talking about fighting hunger. Right now in the country, we do know that we are also faced with that challenge for hunger that was declared a national disaster just a couple of days by the president. Are we at a position where we can say that we have an exact outlook for the hunger situation in the country and the development of this particular sector?
Thank you. Good question. I think the biggest problem that we have, and it is true that hunger has been declared a national disaster.
Yes.
I think the biggest problem that we have is that there are areas in this country that have a lot of food. Actually,
yes.
Now, over the weekend I was in Kitale, and there is a lot of food there. The issues then become, how can we move some of these areas of surplus and move them to the areas that are needed?
Gotcha.
And now this talks about the supply chain. How and it comes to what Justice was talking about, the warehouse receipting. If the warehouse receipting system was working well, then it would be very possible to get food from areas of surplus and moving them to other areas where there is no food.
Yes.
If you go to the Laikipia area, Nyahururu, or those areas, they're having a lot of rain right now. So there is quite substantial amounts of produce that are coming from there. Now, what we need is to find a way of how the private sector can come in and pick this produce, collateralize it for a financial institution to be able to lend onto it, and then these foods can either be bought by the government, by the county governments, or whoever can do this, and it is then sent to the areas of hunger where there is no food.
Yes.
So to me, what comes across more is an issue of distribution of produce from areas of surplus to areas where there is a lack of these foods.
Yes.
And that is where now market systems, when we talk about market systems, that is where these issues of market systems come in. We need to put in structures that are able to move this produce from one area to the other area without the farmer losing out on value. So you are sure that at any one time, the price of a bag of maize will remain at a reasonable level. As long as you have maize, you are sure you'll get a certain level. As long as you have potatoes, you're sure you'll get a certain level of price. And therefore, it then becomes easier to talk to an investor or a financial institution for you to get funding to produce even more. So that when we end up in situations like this, we even have more produce to be taken to these other areas.
Yes.
So in my view, I think that is where the biggest problem comes in. Because at any one time, when there is drought in one part of the country, there is a supply and abundance in another part of the country.
Yes.
And the situation becomes even more interesting when we talk about East Africa and the East African community. There is definitely food in Uganda. If you go to Tanzania, there is. And we are all the same people. We need to create systems that move these foods properly from one area to the other.
Pretty much quite clear and concise. Justice as well. But just to end on that conversation, your specific outlook, it looks like a sector that, it gives a 30% of the GDP. It will still continue to be the strongest sector for the country, but with a lot of bottlenecks. Things that have not ticked yet, despite this sort of willingness from different players in this specific sector to make it tick. just as, would you say that we're making advancements as a country so that we can have a specific outlook, just like Eric is saying? Eric, you just put it on supply chains. What will you put it on, Justice?
Thanks for that. And I'll pick it from what Eric has just mentioned.
Yes.
There's a couple of things that we are making in the right direction, as I mentioned. So the warehouse receipt is one, encouragement of innovations is the another thing, encouragement. And by the way, when we do innovations in the agricultural sector, what we are seeing, we are crowding in youth also to come and perform in the sector as well.
Yes.
So what it means then, initially the things that would have been done with the fork and, the hose and the pangas and all that, now, if we are bringing the digitization angle, then we are seeing youth seeing it as something they can work on.
Yes.
And looking beyond the production and looking at the supply chain, like Eric is saying, the main issue that we have is we are a country of lack, at the same time we're a country of surplus. So connection between surplus and lack is where also the private sector plays a critical role. And some of the things that we talk about private sector playing is the government legislation that we have. When we continue overtaxing our private sector, what it means then, such sector that are very critical to the economy, then our private sector players do not see the importance of getting to it. However, the government is doing something around it. We have seen the credit guarantees schemes that are coming up
Yes.
right now with the government. That is going to give at least confidence into the investor who are coming into the sector, in a way that at least your investment in the sector is guaranteed to a certain level. And also the other thing we are seeing is development partners are playing a critical role. Like the likes of RTI, USID projects, where we have capital flowing, and also what we call the equity being given to agriculture SMEs so that they can try out some specific issues, the investment, to some extent they are cautioned their investment. All that playing together is really going to help the investment in the sector. And over time, we can see there will be a positive impact towards it. On the supply of finance, this is something that I think it requires a lot of investment and also some stakeholder engagement as well, because we have been talking and crying about only just 3 to 4% of investment in this country going to agriculture, or the credit going to the agricultural sector.
Yes.
More importantly, we look at it at 3% because we focus on the banks, but we lack to think about the larger population, as I mentioned in my beginning remarks, who access the finances through microfinance institutions, through SACCOs. What is it that we can do at that level so that we make the finances that is flowing to the sector both nice for the borrowers as well for the financial.
Yes.
And this is where the credit cushions, the guarantee scheme, comes into play. Where the funders will have a cushion towards lending to the sector. Like now, the farmer that was selling the bag of potatoes at 300 shillings, if he had taken a loan that he was supposed to repay, you see that becomes an issue, because, selling 60 bags at 300 shillings, you just get a little less above 18,000 or so.
Yes.
And this is a person probably has invested hundreds of thousands. But if there was a cushion, one being the credit guarantee, it would cushion both the lender who had lent to this gentleman as well as him at harvest. The other thing is about insurance. We are seeing the government working towards developing national insurance schemes, which are working in the country, but the uptake is still quite low. For some reason, you understand that the insurance always relies on the data that, historically, we haven't been able to collect data in the agri sector. And also the climate change, the changes in the weather that is happening as well. So there's quite a lot that needs to be done. We can't say the government has to do everything, and this is where the private sector, the development agencies also becomes critical, so that we think together on all these challenges that we have and how we can sort them out.
Couldn't say it better. At this point, let me say thank you very much to you, Justice Njeru, Senior Manager, MCI's Private Sector Development, and Eric Kingori, Independent Consultant, Finance and Investment, for joining us this morning to make this conversation quite a success. You gentlemen have been quite invaluable this morning.
Thank you. Thank you, Elijah, for having us.
Thank you, Elijah. Appreciate it.
We take a short break, but once we come back, what is the direction of cost of energy in the country? Lots of things going on, but they're coming in the form of executive directives from the president. Is that the way to go? Once we come back.